For our project, our group decided to analyze whether the CO2 emissions and life expectancy of a nation have a direct correlation to the size and success of its economy, which we measured by average income per person, which is found using GDP per capita adjusted for differences in purchasing power. To select economies to study of different sizes, we inquired upon the United Nations country classification site. On this site, countries are assigned into one of three classes based on a set of data the World Economic Situation and Prospects employs to delineate trends in various dimensions of the world economy. From the list of nations labeled to own developed economies, our group decided to study the United States, not only because it is our home country, but because it has been a symbol of economic prosperity over the past 100 years. From the list of economies in transition, those which have some of the characteristics of a developed economy but are not quite there yet, we chose Albania, a country with economic stability yet lacks the international reputation of an economic powerhouse. Finally, to demonstrate a country which is still in the developmental stage, our group chose Ghana, a country whose economy struggles to alleviate extreme poverty in the 21st century. To begin, let's examine the United States, the nation classified with the strongest class of economy with an average income of $53.4 thousand in 2015, higher than both Albania and Ghana. Over the past 200 years, U.S. life expectancy has nearly doubled. While a common misconception is to attribute this to medicinal improvements, the largest leap in life expectancy occurred between 1880 and 1920 due to public health improvements such as cleaner water, more abundant and safer food, and control of infectious diseases. In addition, living conditions vastly improved due to better sanitation, improved sewage management, improved housing, and new food inspection regulations. Impacted by the Second Industrial Revolution, the United States CO2 emissions leaped in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Using fossil fuels to retain its status as a global powerhouse, CO2 emissions slowly rose from 1940 to 1980 until regulations were put in place to keep emissions constant, which in 2013 were 16.4 metric tons per person.
Next, we will compare the relationship between CO2 emissions and life expectancy against Albania's economy. Throughout Albania's history, there has been both military and political conflict. This is as expected since Albania is described as a country in transition. Due to World War I, Albania's life expectancy fell from 35.4 years to 19.4 years in 1918. Then, Albania's life expectancy dropped from 43.5 years in 1938 to 34.1 years in 1944 during World War I or World War II. During this time in Albania's history, the National Liberation Front invaded South Albania, pushing out the last of the Nazi troops. Again, this clearly disrupted markets in the area, and free trade was restricted by the military presence in the area. Looking at the graph for CO2 emissions, there's a clear jump in emissions from the year 1945 of 0.16 metric tons per person to 0.789 metric tons per person in 1947. Even though industrialization is underway during this period, income did not grow due to the transition to a communist state. This is one of the first times where we see an uptick in industrial growth and manufacturing capacity. Then from 1989 until present day, there's a steady growth in income from $3,080 to $10,600. This can primarily be explained by the fact that independent political parties formed in 1990 following communism's collapse in Europe in 1989. The switching to an economic market system allowed free trade to flourish and caused incomes to rise until present day.
Finally, let's investigate the relationship between CO2 emissions and life expectancy and Ghana's economy, measured in average income per person. As a developing country, Ghana's history has been marred with political and social instability. Data starting in 1800 has shown, as shown in Gapminder, and in 1807, Ghana is under British rule. This period of turmoil is represented by Ghana's consistently and extremely low life expectancy of 28 years. This number plummets to a staggering 9.44 years in 1918, when Ghana is hit with an influenza epidemic. It is not until 1957, when Ghana becomes the first black African colony to declare independence, that Ghana truly sees an uptick in both life expectancy and economic growth. From 1983 onwards, Ghana experiences a steady increase in life expectancy and economic growth, finally arriving at a life expectancy of 65.3 years and an average income per person of $4,100 in 2015. While Ghana's CO2 emissions only starts being recorded in 1950, the Gapminder graph suggests that as Ghana increases CO2 emissions and manufacturing productivity, it experiences increases in average income per person and therefore overall economic growth. Based off the data presented, one can clearly see the correlation between CO2 emissions and life expectancy and the overall economic success of a nation, measured by average income. If a nation is classified to own a developed economy, it will produce more CO2 into the atmosphere and own a higher life expectancy. If a country has an economy in transition, its statistics will be between those of a developed economy and a developing economy. If a country's economy is still developing, it will likely own the worst statistics in these two categories. Obviously, if we evaluated every single country instead of merely one from each of the 3 UN classifications, there would be slight anomalies to these correlations due to the vast pool of countries. However, the general rule as demonstrated in our findings holds firm in most cases.